Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, at exactly 3 a.m., and found yourself lying there in complete silence, yet your mind is anything but still? Your thoughts race, your heart pounds, and sleep feels like an impossible dream. It's a familiar struggle, especially as we grow older. But what if I told you this isn't a flaw in your body or mind? What if I told you that waking up at 3 a.m. could be a sign of something much deeper? Something that can actually bring you closer to peace, understanding, and self-awareness? Stay with me in this video as we dive deep into the mysteries of our body's natural rhythms, uncovering why we wake up at strange hours, how emotional and physical restlessness are connected, and what Buddhist wisdom can teach us to embrace change with mindfulness. This is more than just a discussion on sleep patterns. This is about transforming the way you view your body, mind, and life's inevitable changes. Grab a seat, breathe deeply, and make sure to watch until the end. Trust me, you don't want to miss the insights that could change how you experience the quiet hours of your life. If this video speaks to you, hit that like button, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Serenity Path is here to guide you through your most profound awakenings. Section 1, The Shift in Our Body's Rhythm. As we journey through life, the inevitable march of time brings changes, subtle, quiet, yet profound. One of the changes that many of us experience, yet struggle to understand, is the shift in our body's rhythm, particularly when it comes to sleep. It's not a flaw, not a failure, but an aspect of aging that we often meet with confusion, frustration, or even self-judgment. The gentle decline of melatonin, the hormone that governs our sleep-wake cycle, can leave us wondering, why can't I sleep the way I used to? Why am I waking up at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, mind racing? It's easy to view this as a problem, something to be fixed. After all, sleep is such a fundamental part of our well-being. But when we approach these changes with the eyes of mindfulness, we begin to see them differently, not as a sign of something wrong, but as an opportunity for reflection, growth, and acceptance. The shift in our sleep patterns is as natural as the changing of the seasons, impermanent, fleeting, and yet so deeply connected to the ebb and flow of life. Let me share a story about a dear friend, Mary. Mary, in her early 70s, had always been a deep sleeper. For years, she could close her eyes at night and drift into a restful slumber, waking up only when the morning light crept through the blinds. But one day, she noticed something changing. Around 3 a.m., she would wake up, her mind racing with thoughts that seemed impossible to quiet. No matter how many times she turned over or tried to settle back into her bed, sleep eluded her. For weeks, Mary fought against this, feeling frustration rise with each passing night. Then, one day, she learned something that shifted her perspective entirely. A visit to her doctor revealed that, like many others her age, the production of melatonin in her body had started to decline. This was a natural process, nothing to be afraid of. Mary's body was simply evolving, just as it had done in countless other ways throughout her life. The realization didn't immediately ease her discomfort, but it planted a seed of understanding. Mary began to accept the change, instead of fighting it. She stopped viewing waking up in the middle of the night as a problem to be solved. Instead, she allowed herself to experience those quiet hours, sitting with her thoughts, observing them with curiosity, rather than judgment. Sometimes, she would lie in bed and practice deep breathing, gently reminding herself that these thoughts were just like clouds passing through the sky, impermanent and transient. As she leaned into this acceptance, the frustration slowly faded, and peace began to settle in. In Buddhism, we are often reminded of the core teaching of anicca, impermanence. Everything in life changes. Our bodies change. Our sleep patterns change. Even our thoughts and emotions evolve over time. And yet, as humans, we tend to resist these changes. We cling to the way things were, wishing for a return to the past, to a time when sleep came easily and life felt more predictable. But as the Buddha taught, attachment is the root of suffering. It is our attachment to the way things used to be that causes the pain. Instead of clinging to the past or wishing for things to be different, Buddhist wisdom encourages us to approach these changes with mindfulness and compassion. When we wake up in the middle of the night, we can practice observing the change in our sleep patterns with curiosity, not frustration. We can honor the impermanence of our bodies and minds and accept that change is simply a part of the natural cycle of life. When we accept the natural decline of melatonin in our bodies, we start to shift our perspective. No longer do we see waking up at 3 a.m. as something broken or wrong. Instead, it becomes an opportunity, a moment of stillness in a world that is always moving. These early morning hours can be a time for reflection, for connecting with our inner selves, and for cultivating mindfulness. In the gentle silence, we can learn to observe our thoughts without judgment, acknowledging them as fleeting, just as the Buddha taught. Take a moment to imagine the stillness of the night, the quiet ticking of the clock. Instead of battling with your mind, instead of wishing for sleep to return, why not simply allow yourself to rest in the space between wakefulness and sleep? Recognize that this moment is impermanent. It will pass. The morning will come, and the rhythm of your body will continue to evolve. Buddhist mindfulness teaches us that every moment, every thought, every sensation is an opportunity for awareness. The changes in our sleep patterns are not a sign of decline, but a reminder that we are still on a journey. A journey through the ever-changing landscape of life. Rather than resist these changes, we can learn to embrace them with understanding and kindness. The next time you find yourself wide awake at 3 a.m., remember Mary's story. You are not alone in this experience. Countless people face the same shift in their sleep patterns. Rather than viewing this as an inconvenience or a problem, consider it an invitation. An invitation to practice mindfulness. An invitation to simply be with yourself in the quiet hours, free from distraction and the demands of the world around you. Let go of the need for things to be different. Instead, embrace this new rhythm, and find peace in the acceptance of change. When we stop fighting the impermanence of life, we allow ourselves to find harmony within it. This is the wisdom that Buddhism offers us. When we embrace the natural flow of life, we find peace, not in the absence of change, but in the acceptance of it. Practical tips for acceptance and mindfulness. Embrace the moment. When you wake up, rather than immediately trying to fall back asleep, take a deep breath and simply observe your thoughts. Allow them to come and go without judgment. This practice of mindfulness can help ease the frustration of waking up early. Create a peaceful environment, make your bedroom a sanctuary. Reduce distractions, keep it dark, and maintain a calming atmosphere. This can help you better align with your body's natural rhythms. Be gentle with yourself, remember that this change is not a flaw. It is a part of life. Be kind to yourself. Practice self-compassion and allow yourself to experience the quiet hours without self-criticism. Reflect and let go. Use the time you spend awake to reflect on what you are holding on to, whether it is a thought, a memory, or an expectation. Gently release it, knowing that it is impermanent. In the end, the shift in our body's rhythm, while sometimes uncomfortable, can become a source of peace if we approach it with mindfulness and compassion. The Buddha's teachings remind us that life is an ever-changing flow. Instead of resisting the changes in our bodies and our sleep patterns, let us embrace them with grace, understanding, and peace. Section 2, The Changing Sleep Cycles and Advanced Sleep Phase. There is a quiet wisdom in the way our bodies change as we grow older. Often, these shifts are not abrupt, but gentle, like the slow turn of the tide or the fading of twilight into night. One such change that many people experience, yet often misunderstand, is the transformation of the sleep cycle, known in medical terms as Advanced Sleep Phase Syndrome, ASPS. In simple terms, your body begins to feel sleepy earlier in the evening, and as a result, you may wake up naturally much earlier, sometimes as early as 3 a.m. For many, this change is met with confusion or self-blame. Why am I waking up so early? Is something wrong with me? But what if we reframe the question? What if this shift is not something to fix, but something to honor? The Buddha once taught, "As a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot live without a spiritual life." Perhaps these early morning awakenings are not disturbances, but sacred invitations, to stillness, to introspection, to connection with our inner spiritual rhythms. The rhythm of nature, reflected in us. Our modern world often demands that we conform to a rigid schedule: sleep at 11, wake at 7, stay productive, stay busy. But nature doesn't follow the clock. Flowers open with the sunrise, not with an alarm. The moon waxes and wanes without a calendar. And in the same way, our bodies evolve, gradually syncing with their own internal logic, one that becomes more sensitive as we age. Buddhism teaches that dukkha, suffering, arises when we cling to the illusion of permanence. If we expect our bodies to behave the way they did in our youth, we create tension between what is and what we wish to be. And it is within this gap that suffering arises. But when we soften our gaze and shift our expectations, a deeper understanding emerges. Waking at 3 a.m. is not a betrayal of the body, it's the body whispering to us, "I am changing. Please, notice me with compassion." Charles is 68. A retired math teacher, he always prided himself on routine. For decades, he woke at 6:30, had his tea at 7 o'clock, and read the newspaper by 7:30. But recently, he found himself waking at 3 a.m., alert, heart quiet, but mind restless. At first, he resisted. He tried herbal teas, blackout curtains, even counting backward from 1,000. Nothing worked. The early wakefulness persisted. He began to feel like something inside him was broken. But during a conversation with his granddaughter, who practiced mindfulness meditation, she gently said to him, "Grandpa, maybe your body is trying to tell you something. Maybe it's not broken. Maybe it's just different now." That evening, Charles decided not to fight it. He lit a small candle, sat in silence for a few minutes, and simply observed. He noticed how quiet the house was at that hour. How peaceful. The ticking of the clock no longer mocked him, it comforted him. Slowly, these early mornings became his time of reflection. He began journaling his thoughts, praying softly, even listening to the early birds begin their song. Charles didn't change his body. He changed his relationship with the change. And that made all the difference. In Buddhist thought, the third watch of the night, from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., is considered an especially sacred time, ideal for meditation, reflection, and awakening. It's when monks rise to begin their day, to sit in silence, to observe the breath, to enter stillness. What if our bodies, now more attuned to subtler energies, are drawing us back into that ancient rhythm? Instead of asking, "How do I get back to sleep?" we can ask, "How can I be present with myself in this moment?" Here are some gentle suggestions, not as prescriptions, but as possibilities. Light a candle or a soft lamp and sit quietly. Let your breath guide you. Keep a journal by your bed. Write what arises in your heart. Recite a mantra, such as, "This too is part of my path," as a way to ground your thoughts. Gently stretch or walk if your body feels restless, not to tire yourself out, but to befriend your body in this new rhythm. The goal is not to fall back asleep as quickly as possible, but to tend to yourself with care and patience. The Dhammapada reminds us, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. Your changing sleep pattern is a conditioned thing. It is part of the nature of your evolving body. When you see this clearly, not as a personal failing but as a natural transition, you open the door to peace. You are not alone in this. Many have walked this path before you. And many will walk it after. The still hours of the early morning, once filled with anxiety and self-blame, can become a time of gentle solitude, if you allow it. Not all awakenings happen with the sunrise. Some happen quietly, at 3 a.m., in the tender hush of night. Section 3, the role of physical discomfort and mindfulness. As the years pass, our bodies undergo changes that are often subtle but profound. The joints that once moved with ease now creak, the muscles that once felt strong begin to stiffen, and the vitality we took for granted in our youth begins to fade. It's an experience that can evoke frustration, anxiety, or even sadness. We may find ourselves waking in the middle of the night, unable to return to sleep because of aches, pains, or the sudden need to visit the bathroom. These small discomforts, though they seem minor, can disrupt the peace of the night and leave us feeling unsettled, as though our bodies have betrayed us. But what if, instead of viewing these physical changes as burdens, we saw them as opportunities for mindfulness? What if we used them as a way to practice self-compassion and awareness, to reconnect with our bodies in a more intimate and nurturing way? The Buddha's teachings on suffering offer us wisdom here. In Buddhism, dukkha, suffering, is not just something to be avoided, but something to be understood. Suffering arises when we resist the natural flow of life, when we fight against the inevitable changes in our bodies, minds, and circumstances. But what if we learn to see discomfort not as an enemy, but as a teacher? A guide leading us toward deeper understanding, acceptance, and peace. Ellen, a 76-year-old woman, had always prided herself on her ability to sleep soundly. But as she entered her late 70s, she began waking up consistently at 3:30 a.m., a time when the world outside was still and quiet. At first, she thought it was just a natural part of aging, a shift she had no control over. But after several months, she began to notice something. Every time she woke up, it was accompanied by a nagging discomfort in her lower back. A dull ache that seemed to persist no matter how many pillows she adjusted or positions she tried. The pain was mild, but it was constant. It made her restless, and instead of falling back to sleep, she would lie in bed, frustrated. Why is my body doing this to me, she wondered. Why can't I sleep like I used to? But one morning, as she sat with her thoughts, she remembered something her daughter had said to her. Mom, maybe your body is just asking for attention. Maybe it's time to listen to it with kindness. That simple reflection changed Ellen's perspective. Instead of seeing the discomfort as something to fix, she began to see it as an invitation to be more present with her body. The next time she woke up at 3:30 a.m., instead of tossing and turning, she simply lay still. She noticed the aching in her back, the tension in her legs, the tightness in her shoulders. Rather than push it away, she gently breathed into each sensation, allowing herself to observe it without judgment. She didn't try to make it go away. Instead, she practiced being present with it. And in that stillness, Ellen found something remarkable. She found a sense of peace. By accepting the discomfort rather than resisting it, she began to cultivate a new kind of relationship with her body. One rooted not in frustration, but in understanding. In Buddhist philosophy, we are taught to be present with whatever arises, whether it's pain, joy, fear, or discomfort. The Buddha himself experienced physical suffering, and yet he taught that suffering, when approached with mindfulness and awareness, can become a path to liberation. May all beings be happy, may all beings be free from suffering. These words are not just a prayer for others, but a reminder to be compassionate toward ourselves, especially when we experience discomfort or pain. Mindfulness asks us to do more than just tolerate pain. It asks us to engage with it. To turn toward our discomfort with curiosity, not judgment. When we wake up with physical discomfort, whether it's a sore joint, a tight back, or even the need to use the bathroom, we are presented with an opportunity to practice the art of being fully present in the moment. This practice can transform the way we experience suffering. The next time you wake in the middle of the night with physical discomfort, try not to resist it. Rather than angrily wishing it away, or anxiously worrying about the possibility of a restless night, approach the pain with the eyes of mindfulness. Ask yourself, what is my body trying to tell me right now? What can I learn from this moment? Instead of seeing the discomfort as something wrong, see it as a reminder that you are alive. Your body is still with you, still carrying you through each day. Even in discomfort, it continues to offer you experiences and lessons. As the Buddha teaches, suffering is not an inherent part of life, but a result of attachment. We suffer when we hold on to the way things used to be, when we cling to the illusion of a perfect, pain-free existence. But when we let go of this attachment, when we stop resisting the discomfort, we open ourselves to peace. Practical tips for mindful awareness. Incorporating mindfulness into moments of physical discomfort may not always be easy, but with practice, it becomes a powerful tool for inner peace. Here are a few gentle suggestions. Breathe into the discomfort. When you wake up with discomfort, take a few deep breaths. With each inhale, acknowledge the sensation in your body. With each exhale, allow yourself to soften into it. Gentle stretches. Sometimes, stretching can help release tension in the body. But do it gently, without pushing yourself too hard. Just allow your body to move in the way it needs to. Use this time for reflection. Instead of viewing these moments as interruptions, use them as opportunities to reflect. Maybe this is a time to meditate on your life, your relationships, or your thoughts. Consider the teachings of the Buddha and reflect on your own capacity for acceptance. Practice self-compassion. When physical discomfort arises, be kind to yourself. Rather than judging your body for its perceived weaknesses, offer it love and gratitude for everything it has carried you through. As we grow older, physical discomfort will inevitably become a part of our experience. But instead of seeing it as a burden, we can choose to see it as a teacher. It teaches us to slow down, to be mindful, and to embrace the impermanence of our bodies. Just as the seasons change, our bodies change. And instead of resisting, we can choose to flow with these changes. By practicing mindfulness, we can transform moments of discomfort into moments of peace, acceptance, and connection with ourselves. We do not need to be afraid of the aches and pains that come with aging. Instead, we can be present with them, allowing them to be part of our journey, rather than obstacles along the way. In the words of the Buddha, the mind is everything. What you think, you become. If we can cultivate the mind of acceptance, compassion, and mindfulness, we will find that the discomforts of life do not need to steal our peace. They are merely part of the ever-changing rhythm of life, and with mindfulness, we can learn to dance with them. Section 4, Shifting Lifestyle Habits and Reflection. Aging, in its quiet unfolding, brings with it not only changes in the body, but also in how we live, move, and experience our days. What once was a life full of errands, work calls, rushing out the door, or staying up late with family, slowly begins to soften. Our days become quieter. Our routines gentler. And without even realizing it, our lifestyle shifts, and along with it, so does our sleep. This change is rarely abrupt. It creeps in slowly. Dinner moves earlier in the evening, the body feels tired sooner, and the hum of nightly activity gives way to stillness. We begin to fall asleep earlier. And so, we begin to wake earlier, sometimes in the deep silence of 3 a.m., before the birds sing, before the sun begins to stretch its light across the world. At first, this shift feels unsettling. We may think, why am I waking up so early? What's wrong with me? But as with so much in life, perhaps the discomfort doesn't lie in the experience itself, but in our resistance to it. The Buddha taught, nothing is to be clung to as I, me, or mine. Even our routines, even the rhythm of our days, are not ours to possess forever. They are, like everything else, subject to change, to flux, to impermanence. And if we learn to observe that with mindfulness, our daily habits become not something to mourn, but something to honor as part of our evolving path. Walter is 74. He retired just last year after running a small tailor shop for over 4 decades. For most of his life, his days followed a clear rhythm, early mornings filled with customers, evenings spent finishing garments, and nights winding down with a late meal and a glass of wine. But after retirement, something shifted. The shop was no longer there to anchor his hours. His days grew quieter. His dinners crept earlier, 5 p.m., sometimes even 4:30. In the evenings, he'd sit in his recliner, nodding off during the evening news. By 8:30, he was in bed. Then came the early mornings. 3 a.m. wide awake. Heart still. Thoughts wandering. At first, Walter grew irritated. This isn't right, he told himself. I should be asleep like before. But one morning, as he sipped tea in the pre-dawn hush, he noticed something. The way the light from the street lamp fell across the kitchen floor. The way the silence felt sacred. The way the world, for once, wasn't asking anything of him. That moment of stillness sparked a shift, not in his sleep, but in his relationship with sleep. Walter stopped fighting the new rhythm. Instead, he began building small rituals around it. A gentle walk after dinner. Reading poetry in the evenings to stretch his bedtime just a little. Writing reflections at dawn. And slowly, what once felt like a problem became a companion, a new cadence to accompany his life's changing season. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha speaks of observing the body and mind with full awareness, recognizing not only their changing nature, but the way they are shaped by our daily actions. He reminds us that habit, when unconscious, can become a form of bondage. But when illuminated by mindfulness, it becomes a path to freedom. Our habits are not inherently good or bad. They are simply patterns. And in each pattern lies an invitation, to become more conscious, more awake to how we are living. The earlier dinners. The longer moments of stillness. The fading social commitments. These are not losses, they are shifts. And they carry within them the gift of space, to slow down, to listen, to reflect. Living with awareness, gentle practices to support new rhythms. When our lifestyle begins to shift, it's easy to feel disoriented. But with mindfulness, we can respond to these changes with grace. Here are some gentle suggestions to help navigate this stage of life with intention. Reclaim the early morning as sacred time, rather than rushing to fall back asleep, treat this time as a gift. Light a candle, make warm tea, write down dreams or thoughts. Let it be your private sanctuary. Observe your daily routine with curiosity. When do you eat? When do you rest? Are there moments where your body or spirit is asking for something different? Simply noticing is the first step toward compassionate change. Bring ritual into your evenings. Create a winding down practice that feels nourishing, reading, listening to calming music, light stretching. Let this routine support a smoother transition into rest. Limit stimulating habits after sunset. Bright screens, intense conversations, or heavy meals can all disrupt your natural wind-down rhythm. Mindful restraint here is not about restriction, but about reverence for your body's signals. Honor the slowness. Instead of resisting the quieter pace of life, bow to it. Let slowness be the ground from which deeper awareness arises. When we see our shifting lifestyle not as a disruption but as a new season, like spring quietly becoming summer, we begin to relate to it with kindness. We stop forcing ourselves to return to the ways of the past and start embracing the unique rhythms of the present. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply arriving at a different chapter of your life, one where reflection takes precedence over rush, where softness replaces striving. And in that gentle unfolding, there is wisdom. There is beauty. There is peace. The Buddha did not ask us to cling to permanence. He asked us to wake up, to the truth of change, to the breath in this moment, and to the compassion that arises when we meet life as it is. So if you find yourself waking up early, eating dinner at twilight, or feeling the pace of your days slow down, pause. Smile softly. And say to yourself, this too is part of my path. Section 5. Emotional and psychological restlessness. As the night deepens and the world around us settles into silence, it is not uncommon for the mind to stir. In the stillness of 3 a.m., when the noise of the day has faded and the quiet seems to demand attention, our hearts and minds may become restless. The thoughts we've pushed aside during the busyness of the day, unspoken regrets, unhealed wounds, unsaid goodbyes, begin to surface, as if the darkness has provided a stage for them to emerge. It's easy to interpret this as something wrong. Why am I so restless? What is wrong with me that I can't simply sleep? The truth, however, is that emotional and psychological unrest are natural parts of the human experience. The Buddha taught that suffering, dukkha, is not a flaw or something to be avoided at all costs. It is part of the fabric of life, woven through our every thought, every emotion, and every experience. And just as physical discomfort invites us to care for our bodies, emotional unrest offers us the opportunity to care for our hearts and minds with the same mindfulness and compassion. Gloria is 80. A widow, living alone after the death of her husband 3 years ago. She had always been a lively, active woman. But as time went on, she began to notice a shift in herself. Most nights, she would wake at 3 a.m., her body still but her mind restless. At first, she dismissed it as an ordinary part of aging. But slowly, the pattern became clearer. When the world was quietest, her heart would stir with memories of her late husband. Their shared moments, long walks, late-night talks, laughter, would resurface, sometimes so vivid that she felt as though he were still there, beside her. At first, Gloria was frustrated. She wanted to sleep, to shut out the memories, to move forward. Why can't I just sleep like before, she wondered. But one night, as she lay awake, she decided to stop fighting it. Instead of pushing the thoughts away, she began to sit with them. Gently, she allowed herself to remember the good times, the warmth they shared, and the love they had. Slowly, a quiet peace began to settle in her heart. She no longer saw the memories as burdens, but as gifts, reminders of a love well lived, not a loss to mourn forever. The next morning, as she reflected on this new understanding, Gloria realized something profound. Her waking at 3 a.m. was not a disruption of her life, but a reflection of the emotional landscape she had yet to fully acknowledge. By embracing her grief, by allowing herself to feel the emotions she had pushed aside for so long, she was not only honoring the past, but making space for peace in the present. In Buddhism, we are often reminded that emotions are not good or bad. They are simply part of our experience, like the clouds passing across the sky. Some clouds are light and airy, while others are heavy and dark. And yet, both are transient. Neither the light clouds nor the dark ones last forever. Similarly, our emotions, whether joy or sorrow, love or grief, are impermanent. The Buddha taught, suffering is not caused by the things themselves, but by our attachment to them. We suffer not because we feel sad, but because we resist the sadness. We cling to the idea that we should always feel happy, always feel at peace. But the reality of life is that emotions arise, flow, and fade. When we accept them without clinging or rejecting, they lose their power to disturb us. When you wake up in the middle of the night, overwhelmed by emotion, try not to push the feelings away. Instead, observe them with mindfulness. Welcome them as they are. What is my heart trying to tell me right now? What does this emotion need from me? When we wake at 3 a.m. with emotional unrest, the tendency is often to judge ourselves. We might think, why can't I just let go of this feeling? Why am I still grieving, still angry, still afraid? This judgment, this self-criticism, only deepens our distress. The Buddha's teachings on compassion invite us to meet ourselves with the same love and understanding we would offer to a dear friend who is suffering. Instead of pushing the emotions away, offer them kindness. It's okay, you might say to yourself. I'm here with you. I see you. I'm not going anywhere. You are allowed to be here. Just as a loving mother would comfort a crying child, so can we comfort ourselves in moments of emotional restlessness. We can give ourselves permission to feel, to mourn, to grieve, and to love. And we can remind ourselves that these feelings, too, are impermanent. They will pass, as all things do. But the compassion we show ourselves in these moments will remain. Practical steps for cultivating mindfulness in emotional restlessness. Acknowledge the emotion. When you wake up with an emotional storm, simply acknowledge the feeling. I am feeling sad, I am feeling anxious, I am feeling lonely. By naming the emotion, you begin to disarm its power over you. Practice deep breathing. Breathe deeply, focusing on the sensation of the air entering and leaving your body. This simple practice can help anchor you in the present moment and soothe the emotional turmoil. Use a loving-kindness mantra. Gently repeat phrases of loving-kindness, such as, may I be peaceful, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering. This mantra helps cultivate compassion and reminds you that you are worthy of peace, even in moments of unrest. Write in a journal. If your mind is racing with thoughts and feelings, try writing them down. Don't censor yourself, just let the words flow. Sometimes, seeing our feelings on paper helps us understand them better and release their grip on our hearts. Reflect on the nature of impermanence. Remind yourself that all feelings, whether they are joyful or painful, are impermanent. Just as the waves on the ocean rise and fall, so too do our emotions. Sit with them without attachment, knowing that they will eventually recede. When we wake in the middle of the night with emotional unrest, we often feel helpless. But what if this restlessness is not a sign of something wrong, but an opportunity for healing? What if these early morning awakenings are an invitation to sit with our emotions, to witness them with compassion, and to release them with awareness? As we grow older, the emotional weight of our experiences often becomes more pronounced. But instead of seeing this as a burden, we can choose to see it as a path to deeper understanding and self-compassion. Just as the Buddha taught, the way is not in the sky. The way is in the heart. The heart, when given the space to feel, to mourn, to remember, becomes an open vessel for peace. So, the next time you find yourself awake at 3 a.m., remember Gloria's story. Allow yourself to feel whatever is there. And in that quiet moment, offer yourself the compassion you deserve. When you do, you may find that the emotional restlessness is not something to fear, but something to embrace, as part of the beautiful, unfolding journey of life. Kam on ban rat mu vi su tin tuong va and hung loi ken goi. Dui de la fan section 6 doak fat trian theo fong catch tram gam, dong cam va fan on, long gep triad ly fat jiao, ka chien ka nan, kunyan hung loi kuyen tuk te mang tin chualan, nam jup nuoi dok tip tuc tim kim su ten tuk va hoa ben noi tom trong han trin doi dien voi and hung thay doi trong kuok song. Section 6, The Wisdom of Acceptance and Embracing Change. Change, in all its forms, is inevitable. Yet for many of us, it is also the most difficult thing to accept. Whether it's the physical changes that come with aging, the shift in our daily routines, or the ebb and flow of our emotional landscape, change often feels like an intrusion, something that disrupts the stability and predictability we crave. We cling to what was, wishing to hold on to the past, and in doing so, we create tension within ourselves. But what if, instead of resisting change, we learn to embrace it? What if we saw change not as a disruption, but as a natural part of life's unfolding? The Buddha's teachings on impermanence offer us profound wisdom here. In his teachings, we are reminded that everything changes, our bodies, our minds, our lives. Change is not something to be feared, but something to be understood and accepted with compassion. When we come to terms with the impermanence of all things, we can begin to let go of our attachments, the attachments to our old ways of being, our expectations, and our ideals. And in that letting go, we create space for peace to emerge. Sarah is 72. She has spent much of her life in a constant flurry of activity, raising children, managing her career, running a household, and keeping up with the ever-present demands of life. But in recent years, as her body began to slow down, Sarah found herself facing a challenge she had never expected. Her energy, once boundless, now felt limited. The simple tasks of everyday life, cooking, cleaning, even walking, became more taxing. At first, Sarah resisted this change. She found herself feeling frustrated and defeated. Why can't I keep up the way I used to, she asked herself. I'm not the person I was. I'm losing myself. This resistance, this struggle against the natural course of life, only deepened her sense of sadness and frustration. But one evening, as she sat quietly in her favorite armchair, gazing out at the sunset, something within her shifted. She remembered a passage from a Buddhist teaching she had read years ago. Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment. And in that moment, Sarah realized that by clinging to the past and wishing for things to be the way they once were, she was denying herself the opportunity to fully experience the present. She was missing the beauty and the peace that resided in this moment, just as it was. From that realization, Sarah began to embrace the changes that were unfolding in her life, not as failures, but as part of the natural flow of life. She stopped comparing herself to the woman she used to be. Instead, she turned her attention to what she could do in the present. She took slower walks, enjoyed the simplicity of a cup of tea, and allowed herself to rest without guilt. As Sarah shifted her mindset, she noticed something beautiful. The more she embraced change, the more at peace she became. She found joy in the quiet moments, in the stillness, in the acceptance of her body's natural rhythm. The Buddha taught that attachment, to people, experiences, and even our own sense of self, was the root cause of suffering. We suffer because we resist the flow of life. We hold on to what we know, what we expect, and what we wish for, but in doing so, we create unnecessary tension within ourselves. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha reminds us, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. This teaching highlights the profound power of our minds. If we cling to the belief that things should remain static, we create suffering for ourselves. But if we can train our minds to accept the impermanence of life, we begin to see change not as a threat, but as an invitation to grow, to evolve, and to learn. By practicing mindfulness, we come to understand that change is not something to fear. It is simply the natural unfolding of life. Just as the seasons change, so too does everything around us. When we accept this, we create space for peace. How can we cultivate the practice of mindful acceptance in our daily lives? How can we learn to embrace change without fear? Here are some gentle practices that can help. Recognize the impermanence of all things. When you encounter a change, whether it's a change in your body, your routine, or your life circumstances, take a moment to acknowledge that this change is part of the natural flow of life. Remind yourself that nothing stays the same forever. Everything, including our thoughts, feelings, and experiences, is impermanent. Practice letting go. In moments of resistance, gently remind yourself to let go of what you cannot control. Let go of the need for things to stay the same. Instead, focus on what you can control, your response, your mindset, and your actions in the present moment. Cultivate gratitude. Even in the midst of change, there is always something to be grateful for. Practice acknowledging the small blessings in your life, whether it's the warmth of the sun, the sound of a loved one's voice, or the simple act of breathing. Gratitude helps shift our focus from what is lost to what remains. Embrace the present moment. Rather than longing for the past or worrying about the future, bring your attention to the here and now. The present moment is where peace resides. By focusing on what is happening right now, you can find solace and acceptance in the midst of change. Change is not something that we can control, but it is something we can learn to navigate with mindfulness and grace. By accepting the impermanence of life, we free ourselves from the burden of resistance. We create space for peace, for acceptance, and for deep connection with the present moment. As we embrace the changes in our lives, whether they are physical, emotional, or situational, we allow ourselves to be fully present with what is. We no longer fight against the tide of life. Instead, we learn to flow with it, trusting that each moment is an opportunity for growth, healing, and wisdom. The Buddha's teachings offer us a simple, yet profound message: change is inevitable. Suffering is optional. When we choose acceptance, we choose peace. When we stop resisting, we open ourselves to the fullness of life. So, what did you learn today? Are those quiet, still hours of the night really a problem? Or could they be a precious opportunity to connect with the deeper wisdom within us all? Waking up at 3 a.m. doesn't have to be a source of frustration, it can be a doorway to reflection, growth, and acceptance. By embracing the impermanence of life and practicing mindfulness, we can transform even the most restless moments into opportunities for peace. If you found value in this video and the insights shared, I encourage you to take a moment to leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your own experiences, or how you're planning to embrace these quiet moments with more peace. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Serenity Path. Join us on this journey of mindfulness, peace, and understanding. Together, let's find calm in the chaos and embrace the flow of life's changes. Thank you for being with us today. Until next time, may you find serenity in the stillness and peace in the moments that matter most.